Breaking news edition, I'm Benita Levine. The goals of the war remain clear. Eliminate the Hamas terror threat from Gaza, secure the release of the Israeli hostages held by terrorists for 170 days, and make sure Hamas cannot conduct another terror rampage inside Israel. Right now, intense fighting continues in the Shifa hospital complex in Gaza, almost a week since the IDF launched a surprise raid on that premises. Earlier on in the war, some hostages were held captive at that hospital. At the same time, talks continue in Qatar amidst efforts to secure a hostage truce deal, with top Mossad, Shin Bet and CIA officials leaving negotiating teams to reach an agreement. Humanitarian aid remains a focal point, with the UN chief and US officials weighing in again. Germany's foreign minister Annalena Baerbock is travelling to the Middle East today, her sixth trip since the October 7th massacre. In the north, tensions remain high across the Israeli-Lebanon border, with the Hezbollah terror group continuing to show its solidarity with Hamas in Gaza. The group in southern Lebanon announcing the death of one of its members killed in an apparent Israeli strike. The announcement coming after an alleged IDF strike earlier on Sunday on a vehicle in the east of Lebanon, as well as other recent strikes on Hezbollah targets in the past 24 hours. More in this report by Arlene Plachmeier.
The IDF has conducted another strike deep inside Lebanon. A Hezbollah weapons manufacturing plant was hit in Al Sera on the outskirts of Baalbek, some 62 miles from the Israel-Lebanon border. Reportedly, 3 people were wounded. The strike comes after several missile, rocket and drone attacks on northern Israel over the weekend. Hezbollah replied by shooting rockets into northern Israel. The terror organization released a statement saying that in response to the bombing of a place in the city of Baalbek, it targeted an Israeli missile and artillery base with more than 60 rockets. The IDF confirmed Hezbollah's claim, saying about 50 launches from Lebanese territory into Israeli territory were detected. A number of launches were intercepted and the rest fell in open areas. In a quick closing of the circle, aircraft attacked the launchers, from which some of the launchers into Israeli territory were detected. Following Hezbollah's response, the IDF struck southern Lebanon, killing a Hezbollah operative. This is the 4th time the IDF strikes deep inside Lebanese territory. The strike at El Sera ends a period of relative calm that had lasted around 10 days.
So for more insight into all these developments, we welcome to studio Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangart, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers and the former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF. Yaki Dayan, former Israeli consul in Los Angeles, and our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here in studio on the Festival of Purim, which of course is supposed to be a festival, a time of celebration, a time of joy for young and old. We're going to get straight to the developments on the ground. And Eitan, I want to start specifically up north, Hezbollah, the activities across that northern front on this day.
First, I would like to say that we are keeping the headline of the escalation that we already faced 2 to 3 weeks ago, but we are not crossing it. We are not climbing up. We are coming to the top of this stage. What does it mean? And it starts with the high level. The Hezbollah already attacked in Israel with 2 UAVs. And the reaction of Israel, the UAV is going to be, in my opinion, the maximum way Hezbollah and Iran will plan the under-escalation or a war. It will be dozens of such a case, and they are launching 2 or 3, but not crossing it, in order to get experience on this kind of attack. Israel respond, the IDF respond on attacking, let's call it the capital of the building the forces of the UAVs in the Baalbek. There is the storages, there you have the launchers of the UAVs, and you have the other kind, and complete this kind of mission. So against it, Hezbollah reacted, and it's the 3rd time, with 50 rockets. What does it mean? The rockets are launching the 3rd time to the Golan Heights. Most of them open field. Only 4 were hidden by Israel air defense systems. So the meaning, we are coming back to the top in this escalation, but we are not crossing it. Israel again reacting in the Bekaa Valley, in Baalbek. Hezbollah, under circumstances of using UAV, the UAV is going to be one of the main issues or type of arsenal of weapon system that Israel should prepare itself. So the reaction was around it. Even I can say that in my estimation, we are not going to cross it at least the coming 1-2 weeks. We are not on a war in the north, but we are still on the top that we recognized before.
Yaki, I want to bring you in here because Yoav Gallant is heading to Washington, some major meetings. The war strategy certainly is being scrutinized by the US. A lot of pressure in recent weeks out of Washington. Your sense, obviously, what's happening across the northern front will be included, as will the hostage truce deal, as will the Rafah operation.
Absolutely. So the north is going to be a main issue. I mean, the target of Israel is bringing back the population back to their homes up in the north, and that's a big question. Now, clearly, no one wants an overall war. I mean, the Israelis, the Iranians, the Hezbollah, and especially not the Americans in 2024. They don't want to see an overall war. That would be devastating for them. So they're pressuring very much. But it is connected to what is going on in Gaza. So you have to achieve some kind of a peace and quiet in Gaza in order to reach some kind of an agreement, an interim agreement. It's going to be a band-aid. It's not going to be an overall agreement. But the target is to bring back the Israeli target, obviously, is to bring back the population back to their homes in 2024. And that has to be achieved through a diplomatic solution. So this is one thing. The second major issue that Gallant is going to deal is no doubt the ammunition. Ammunition, and again, the ammunition, it's a big issue of all over the world, but especially here now in this war, and this is one of the main issues that Gallant is going to deal with. Rafah, he's going to, as Ron Dermer and Hanegbi, the National Security Advisor, that are heading to Washington, and they are going to deal only on Rafah, but no doubt that the Minister of Defense is going to deal with Rafah as well. He's going to explain in details what's the Israeli plan. He has to. And overall, he is the partner of Austin over there, so there will be a very thorough discussion on those issues as well, because Israel is determined to have an operation in Rafah, and the Americans obviously are extremely worried about it.
And nailing down that exact point is Kamala Harris and Owen, the Vice President, saying there could be consequences from the US if Israel does move into Rafah. What do you make of that messaging from Kamala?
It's new. I mean, listen, Benita, it's possible we've heard whispers like this in the past, but to my ears, new to hear the vice president come out, and when she is asked in a second or third follow-up question, would there be consequences? She said, I don't rule out anything, or I rule out nothing.
What do consequences look like, though?
Well, surely it could include, and Yaki Dan was alluding to this, right? Slowing down further weapons shipments to Israel, or denying Israel weapons shipments, stopping using the veto in the UN Security Council. Those are the two that are most often cited as the real points of U.S. leverage over Israel. But obviously we can think of plenty of others if the consequences were to go even beyond those. But listen, it is new for such a senior member of the administration to come out and to be so blunt. Her body language in that interview on ABC News also very, very telling, very cold, very chilly toward Israel. That may not be as new coming from Kamala Harris. She's been seen as the most pro-Palestinian voice from within the senior echelons in the administration, but still very, very telling, again, on the eve of these two very, very big visits and crucial visits to Washington this week. You have Gallant's visit and the visit of the Dermer Hanegbi delegation.
I may say one thing, that between the issue on Rafah and between a war in the north, we are under a problem. We have a problem because the United States on one hand is supporting Israel and the advantage of the quality of Israel, but on the other hand made a big damage to Israel because of the tense of the relationship between Bibi Netanyahu and President Biden that has gone now top down. And I mean the statement like Kamala Harris and the other, open a gate to the EU, to Germany, to Canada and others in order to create pressure on Israel according to the war on the combination between humanitarian issue and the issue of, when you are calling it humanitarian, and the issue of the diplomat activities. On the other hand, it's still supporting Israel. I think that we have to solve it on a way to reduce this kind of statements. It's making damage. This damage will not be solved in the coming future. It will take time to Israel to return back to the place it has been on the beginning in this war. So the visit of Gallant has a meaning. With the visit after Benny Gantz, and there will be this week delegation of operational experts that are coming to discuss about the issues of Rafah. But above all, I think now we are under a damage, under this kind of tense on the relationship between the leadership Israel, United States.
And one very quick point, Benita. Look, even if there aren't going to be consequences, quote unquote, the very fact of it being mooted already creates damage to the relationship, already opens up a possibility that could be used sometime in the near or even distant future. There is damage in the very fact that this was said.
Something we're going to take a deeper look at in a short while. Gentlemen, stay with us, more to discuss. But now we ask the question, will negotiators in Qatar be able to work through the so-called gaps between the sides amidst efforts to secure a hostage truce deal as the war approaches the 6-month mark? The deal on the table in Doha reportedly involves the release of 40 Israeli hostages held by terrorists in Gaza in exchange for a 6-week truce. 134 hostages are still being held captive. No official confirmation as to how many of them are alive. Now for more, we go to our correspondent Balir Sladin. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. And Balir, negotiating teams are still in Qatar, even though the Mossad, the Shin Bet and CIA leaders have left. What are the main sticking points? We hear that there are a huge number of Palestinian security prisoners in terms of the demands that Hamas wants to have freed in return for those 40 Israeli hostages, most of whom are civilians.
Yes, exactly. Well, first of all, a couple of blocks from here, not very far away, the families of the hostages and their supporters are blocking the road in order to pressure the Israeli government to accept the terms of the latest proposal. But from what we understand, there is a lot of flexibility from the Israeli side, especially in two main issues that were the main disagreements between Israel and Hamas. The first one is concerning the return of the families that left the north of Gaza to the southern city of Rafah to the return to their homes. Israel a couple of weeks ago disagreed on this specific issue, and later on Israel said that the mothers and their children and maybe the elderly can go back to their homes in the north, but not the men, because they are afraid that Hamas will recruit them and then Israel will lose its main military achievement of occupying the north of Gaza. Now we see that there is some flexibility with a gradual return proposal, an American proposal that Israel accepted to get into and negotiate with the other side. So this is the first issue. The other one regarding the number of Palestinian security prisoners. From what we understand, Israel now agreed that there will be 700 and even more than 700 Palestinian security prisoners freed in exchange of the 40 Israeli civilians, or actually mostly civilians. 5 of them is female soldiers, and these female soldiers will be exchanged for each of them will be exchanged for 5 life sentence Palestinian prisoners, which means that Israel now agrees on a higher number of Palestinian prisoners in exchange of these female soldiers. I remind you that the Paris initiative was talking about 3. Now we're talking about 5. And this is, of course, showing some flexibility on that specific issue as well from the Israeli side. But what we need to wait for is the official Hamas response. The Israeli officials are saying that we are showing some flexibility, but if the Hamas response was negative, then we can't continue with these negotiations, and all will be somewhat in vain, all the talks in Doha. But if there was some positive response from Hamas, then the negotiation can continue, especially in regards of that the return of the families from the south of Gaza to the north of Gaza, and there will be continuation of these talks in Doha. From what we understand, the response could be in 2 to 3 more days. So as soon as even tomorrow or the day after, we could see an official response from Hamas, and then we will know whether David Barnea will go back to Doha and the negotiation will continue, something that, of course, the families of the hostages are wishing for, and that's why they are yet pressuring the Israeli government with that blocking of the roads, with these demonstrations, with everything that we've seen also yesterday that has been happening since the beginning of this war.
Time is of the essence, no doubt about it. Thank you so much for now. Correspondent Balia Sladin, live from Tel Aviv. Now, it was a surprise security operation by the IDF inside northern Gaza. Tomorrow marks 1 week since Israeli troops re-entered the Shifa hospital complex, believed to be a Hamas stronghold, recovering weapons and cash hidden in the premises. Scores of terrorists have been killed in the past 6 days, hundreds of suspects arrested, including senior Hamas officials. Al Joe Brown has more in this report.
It's approaching 1 week since the IDF went back into Shifa Hospital, the largest in the Gaza Strip. Since then, over 800 people have been arrested in the grounds of the hospital, with the IDF saying 170 terrorists have been killed. And this operation shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon.
The operation here in Shifa is significant. A daring, tricky, and most impressive operation so far. It struck hundreds of terrorists, apprehended hundreds of terrorists, and brought in significant operational and intelligence assets. We are continuing with this operation. The leadership of the commanders is excellent, and we will finish this operation only when the last terrorist is in our hands, alive or dead.
Of the 800 suspects arrested, 480 are confirmed to have links to Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hundreds are still being interrogated by the Israeli security forces. Israeli soldiers are continuing to uncover weapons and storage depots. But amidst the heavy fighting around the hospital, the IDF has also confirmed the death of 21-year-old Staff Sergeant Lior Aviv, the third Israeli casualty in the week-long operation. His death brings the number of IDF fatalities since the ground operation began to 252. Elsewhere, the IDF is continuing its operation throughout the entirety of the Gaza Strip. The IDF has struck 65 Hamas targets in northern and central Gaza, where heavy fighting still persists. The Nahal unit has eliminated several terrorists in the central part of the Strip, including during a raid on a drone manufacturing facility. And fighting is still persisting in southern Gaza, where the international community is watching carefully ahead of the seemingly imminent Rafah operation. But with Monday marking 1 week since Israeli forces re-entered Shifa Hospital following the initial operation 4 months ago, Hamas still maintains a stronghold in northern Gaza, a grip that Israel is doing whatever it can to loosen.
So for the latest on the ground, we now go live to our correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us from southern Israel on the Israel-Gaza border. And as we heard in that report, Rob, fighting continues around the Shifa hospital complex. Scores killed, scores arrested. What is the latest there and across the Strip?
So reading between the lines of some of the press releases that came out of the IDF this evening, it's beginning to become clear that it's not just the Al-Shifa hospital itself. It's increasingly some of the buildings, even the extended neighbourhood around it, that does seem to be the focus of the combat there, as it does sound like that operation is expanding, continues, and is spreading out into the areas around it. But it is worth also noting that it is not the only hospital which is the centre of combat at the moment. Al-Shifa is in the north of Gaza, but down south in Khan Yunis, there's 2 hospitals, Al-Amal and Nasser, where it's understood that there are operations taking place there. The Palestinian Red Crescent said earlier this evening that, in their words, the IDF had put these 2 hospitals under siege, and the IDF has confirmed that its troops are operating in the Al-Amal area this evening. So With the IDF saying, in fact, that essentially Hamas was using that medical facility as a military infrastructure, and therefore necessitating its troops operating there. But as we just heard in the last report, there's combat taking place at some scale, not always at the most intense scale, but taking place in various parts of the Gaza Strip. A press release from Hamas's forces this evening said that they had their forces attacked IDF forces in Gaza City, Beit Hanun in the far north of the Gaza Strip, as well as a couple of locations in Khan Yunis. So it does seem that the combat is taking place in quite a few parts of the Gaza Strip. And the principal reason that this will be a concern for the IDF is the fact that as the government scales up anticipation for an operation in Rafah, the message that they are selling both to their Western allies who are not sounding too favourable about such an operation, but also to the Israeli public, the message they're selling is, we just have to go into Rafah and this can all be over. It could just take a few more weeks, a few more months. But as the combat in other parts of the Gaza Strip seems to gradually scale up, that could set alarm bells ringing that Hamas is being able to start some sort of insurgency that could go on into the longer